Time for another edition of Sports Talk with Puckett and Pontzer here on the airwaves of 88.3 WXOU, Auburn Hills, Michigan, on the campus of Oakland University. Puckett, we had a 2-week hiatus there. The carpets were being cleaned here in the studio, so we were not able to record last week. A lot has happened since we were last on the air, but we're ready to have a big show today. We have some Tigers. There's some playoffs going on in both basketball and hockey. And then there's some other things going on in the Detroit area. So we're going to get started. The wait is finally over, Puckett. The torture that the Detroit Tigers fans had to suffer at the hands of one Papa Grande is now over. Manager Jim Leland announced today that he is going with Joaquin Benoit as his primary starter.
Joaquin.
I like saying Joaquin. Joaquin Benoit as his primary closer for at least for the here and now, after Mr. Valverde got absolutely destroyed yesterday in a non-save situation. So now Benoit is going to, in tonight's game here against the Red Sox, it hasn't started yet, but if it's a safe situation, he's going to trot out the 35-year-old closer in the last year of his contract. So what do you think about this move?
Well, I think it's important that they don't go with Valverde anymore. I'm not a big fan of Benoit being the guy because, I mean, there's a reason that he's the setup guy. He's been a setup guy for pretty much his whole career, going back to his time with the Rays in Tampa and here for the past 2 years.
Rangers before that.
But I mean, he's good at what he does. He's good at being the eighth inning guy, and taking him out of that role doesn't make me extremely comfortable because then who's your eighth inning guy? You know, you just kind of move the problem instead of solving the problem. So, and as far as I'm concerned, until Valverde is DFA'd. And it's no longer with the Tigers organization, I will not be okay with him being on the roster at all, because right now, if he's not your closer, he's just an empty roster spot. So, I mean, once again, you didn't solve the problem, you just hit it. So, I mean, for Jim Leland to say that is almost insulting to the fans, because, you know, a bunch of people are going to celebrate this, but he didn't really do anything. He just moved the problem. So that's what I think.
Right, and he's been a guy in Benoit who's been fantastic as the eighth inning guy. You know, a couple years ago when they went to the ALCS, you had either like an Albuquerque or a Coke in the seventh inning, then you had Benoit in the eighth, then you had Valverde in the ninth, and that was it. And it was always how it worked. Now, this past season, you had you've had the closer by committee at the beginning of the year. You had Coke last postseason, so Coke didn't really do well this year. You've had Benoit earlier this season try and fail. You had you brought up Rondon, the miracle worker that was supposed to just be the hot stuff, but he was a young guy, not very experienced. And then you brought back the corpse of Valverde, who worked initially, but has since really just failed down the stretch.
He can't throw. He's completely used up. I don't think he ever worked. If anything, it's kind of like the guy that you bring up for a spot start and he dominates, like Alvarez did in his first start. But I don't expect Alvarez to do as well tonight as he did in his first start, because the guys figure him out. And that's the same thing that happened to Valverde. I mean, Valverde came back a little bit of a different pitcher than he had been in the previous 2 years, because he hadn't pitched in a while. And even though there's tape on him, when you lose your stuff like Valverde did so quickly last year, especially in the playoffs, you're still a little bit of a different pitcher. So, 2-3 appearances, and now these guys, he's throwing batting practice.
Well, and the thing is, and it's been well documented, is his pitch is that splitter pitch. And I'm not a catcher or a pitcher or any means, but the idea of a splitter is that it kind of, it does the roll off the table thing, and a batter initially sees it and thinks he can hit it. And his delivery is the same with that pitch as it is as with a fastball. So it looks like you're going to be able to hit it, but then you can't, and they miss. It's, the similar with the sinker that Rivera uses, and people know what Rivera's going to throw, yet they still think they're going to hit it, and he's been doing that for 15 years. But the thing about Valverde is he had a stretch where it worked, the 49 for 49, and, he hasn't always been pretty, but he got it done. Then he came back this year, and the splitter really wasn't there, so he was kind of throwing some fastballs and some changeups. But the thing is he would still try and use that splitter, and it would just stay up in the zone, and a hitter could just knock it out of the park. And last night he came in, or last afternoon, and I was at the game with my little brother, went to the game, and the Tigers were getting smoked. And so Leland sent him out there. Really just kind of needed an arm to use, and Valverde hadn't pitched in like 3 days, so he put him out there. And Valverde had a point in time where he had 5 pitches, 3 hits, 2 runs, and he gave up an absolute bomb to Chris Davis, who leads the league in home runs right now. But and you can say whatever you want about Chris Davis. He's a great hitter, but I mean, I could have hit it at least to the outfield. You know what I mean? Like Chris Davis, it was right over the plate, just a meatball, and Chris Davis took it yard to right field and deep in right field. So Valverde's a guy who he started the season with a .75 ERA. And then since May 27th, his ERA has ballooned up to 5.59. So, frankly, you can't use him anymore. He's a guy who, he just can't get the job done. He lost that game out in Kansas City. He's had struggles in the past. Some saves he barely gets it done, and he's just not a guy you can count on for a team that aspires to not only win the division but win a World Series.
Right, and you can find anybody to give up a home run to Chris Davis. I
Right.
mean, and whether somebody's hitting singles or they're getting walks. Bruce Rondon can come up and walk 5 straight guys, and I'd be more comfortable.
Right, that's
with
the thing
it.
about Valverde. That's what I
Or
say.
not that I'd be more comfortable with it, but just like anybody can blow a save.
Right, exactly. But the thing about Valverde is he just doesn't have it anymore. And I was talking to a friend of mine, and he thought that Leland just sent him out there to fail yesterday. And not only that, but he left him out there too because he came in, he got some booze. And I had to explain to my little brother what a Bronx cheer was because, like I said, he didn't get one called strike through those 5 pitches. They were just guys were getting contact, and then they were getting solid contact, base hit, home run. That's what happened. And Jeff Jones comes out, talks to him. He comes back out, then gives up like 2 or 3 more hits, and then he finally is done. And he ended up getting 3 outs. But I had to tell that to Noah because once he finally got a called strike, there wasn't a lot of fans left because it was 13-3. But people were like, "Hey, about time." And I said to Noah, I said, that my little brother, I said that might be the last time you see Valverde in a Tigers uniform,
right?
Because I don't know how you come back from that because. And he's very. I'm very lucky that if that was a safe situation and he did that, I think we'd definitely be running him out of town. But obviously this one he had an 8-run deficit and it turned into a 10-run deficit, or I'm sorry, like a 6 or 7-run deficit. Now it was 10. So Leland he said today to the reporters in the afternoon before the game, he said that Benoit he said. Quote, he's going to be the closer when he's healthy and available, but he's not naming a closer. And he said that right now, Benoit, he said, is, quote, the primary closer for the time being. So, a couple days ago, he said that Valverde's the guy, and that's all he has. And personally, and I was going to ask you about you as, a little side topic here, is I think that Leland is putting the ball in Dombrowski's court here. He's telling him, look, I don't have anything to work with. And, you give him a great lineup. Obviously, you have some of the best hitters in the game in that lineup. You have a terrific starting pitching staff. And we're going to get into that a little bit later. But, I mean, a terrific starting 5. And, Dombrowski shut out the money for guys like Prince Fielder and Anibal Sanchez. And then you re-sign your own in a guy like Verlander. But your bullpen is just kind of like, well, we don't really know. And you've had different guys come through, and you've called up different guys. You have guys coming from Toledo all the time. You had Rondon at the beginning. He's down. He's a mudhead once again. And I think Leland's telling Dombrowski, look, this team is great, but there's like one leak, and it's a big leak. And I've compared it before. It's like having that Ferrari without the insurance. You have this great team, top to bottom, especially in the hitting department and the starting pitching. But your relief pitching is kind of so-so. You have some guys like Smiley that are doing well, but that back end of the bullpen is really worrisome. And I think Leland put Valverde out there. Not only did that, left him out there, showed how bad he really has become. And now he's saying, hey, you got a guy in Benoit who is below 500 in a career-saving save situations because he was a closer for a bit in his career. He's a great setup guy, but for some reason that 9th inning comes on, he's not always the greatest. I think he really wants Dombrowski to make a move and make it sooner than later.
Well, I mean, the move that Dombrowski made was the one that he made early in the year, in September, or in, December of last year. He said Bruce Rondon's the closer, and he's not. Right. So, I mean, Bruce Rondon is in a Toledo Mud Hens uniform. The guy's got 27 appearances. He has a 1.01 ERA. He's 1-1, and he has 14 saves. So why is he not up here? I mean, I understand that he's walked 12 guys, which is a lot, especially for just 26.2 innings pitched. But he has 38 strikeouts, and he's only given up 3 earned runs.
Yeah.
So Valverde gave up 3 earned runs yesterday.
Yep.
So
he gave up more than that. He gave up like 4 or 5. Yeah, he gave up a lot.
Right. So where's Bruce Rondon? He was supposed to be the guy.
Well, and I think where he is we saw him. We saw him twice. We saw him in spring training, and that's when people started to get worried because all we had heard about was how great Rondon has been, and we devoted whole half-hour segments of our shows to this early on when we first started because that was, you're absolutely right. Dombrowski put all his big eggs in that basket, said, "Hey, this is the guy," and he hasn't exactly been great at all, and instead now you have. He had to bring in the corpse of Valverde and, re-sign a guy that, was great for you before, but now he hasn't been able to do anything. So I think we saw Rondon like a month ago. He wasn't very successful, and he was sent back down for, more training and work on his pitching. And so now I don't know if Rondon's ready to come back up yet because he's a young guy and he lacks that experience.
Right. But I still think that he's the guy. I mean, that is what Dombrowski said from the beginning, and that's how it should be. I mean, to use Jose Valverde is an insult. I really think it is because he doesn't have it anymore. He doesn't. I mean, you could just pull somebody off the street, and granted, they're not going to throw 90 miles an hour, but they can give up all those runs too.
See, I think Leland knows that, and I think that's what he was trying to show Dombrowski, that he no longer is the guy. And that's why he left him out there yesterday. And now, he's saying, hey, I need a guy. I'm going to put Benoit out there, and we're going to see what happens. But which they tried earlier this year. Benoit, they tried that closer by committee thing, and he has he has finished 11 games this year for the Tigers and 42 overall since the time he's been here in Detroit. He has 4 saves and a 1.80 ERA in his time with Detroit, which has been like 3-4 years or so. But this is he's not a young guy. He's 35, Mr. Joaquin Antonio Benoit Pena, and this is the last year of his deal. He makes $5.5 million a year, which is a lot of money for a setup guy. But when the Tigers brought him in, that was what it was for, and it worked. The year they went to the ALCS, like that was very successful. Either Coker, Albuquerque, or somebody 7th, Benoit 8th, Valverde 9th, and it was like clockwork. It worked. Last year, you had some injuries. Albuquerque wasn't in the picture, but it's still Benoit was still your setup guy. This year, it's been whatever happens. And so I just think it's interesting. Right now, Leland is making Benoit his guy, but I think, personally, I think he's really trying to push the hand of Dombrowski and get him to give him a better closing option.
Right, and Dombrowski really doesn't have any options right now. I mean, the problem is that this bullpen wasn't built up in the offseason because you're not going to get anybody right now because nobody is really out of it besides, like, Houston and the Marlins. But they don't have quality either.
Well, I was going to ask you, there's a couple options out there. One big one that a lot of people have brought up is Jonathan Papelbon out in Philadelphia.
But even if you went and got him, you're not going to get him until late July when the deadline is.
Yeah, and don't forget he makes $13 million a year,
right?
And he still has, I believe, 2 years or 2.5. So 2 years after this season left on that deal with Philly. And Philly right now is a 500 ball club that they compete in that competitive NL East. But you have Atlanta out there, you have Washington, so maybe they'd be willing to make a move. I think a guy, and I heard about this the other day, yesterday. A guy that you might look into is, you remember he was great a couple years ago, is K-Rod, and he's out in Milwaukee. And Milwaukee has several closing options right now, and he's kind of resurrected his career a bit out there in with the Brewers. And the Brewers are a team that right now in the NL Central, there's like 3 teams that are kind of like at the front, and then you have Milwaukee that's kind of fallen down. So they would probably be willing to ship off Francisco Rodriguez because he's one of those guys, and you see this happen in sports a lot, hockey and baseball, where a guy tries to resurrect his career with kind of a lesser team. You look at like Jaromir Jagr this year. He signs with Dallas, kind of resurrects his career again, and then that team is willing to ship him off because they know they're not going to bring him back. He was a reclamation project.
But closers aren't like that. Closers aren't traded like a left fielder or like a second baseman. It's not the same. And I think your closer's got to come from within your organization. Papelbon came from the Red Sox, but the Red Sox used him for a long time, and he was signed in an off-season. It's just different. I don't think you're going to trade for a closer, have him come to a different park, and you have to make sure that his pitching style matches your park. Like a fly ball pitcher will work better in Comerica, but they kind of want a guy that strikes out a lot because that's what matches the style of the Tigers' rotation and even their bullpen. So I'm really not interested in trading for a closer. I'm really not. If they did it, I would be okay with it, but it's really not in my interest. I want to see them go with a younger guy and just see if he can do it. And I'd rather them try different guys, and if Bruce Rondon can't do it, then try somebody else.
Well, that's personally, I like that idea if you're a team that isn't the Tigers. If you're a team that doesn't have the expectations and the resources and the talent that the Tigers do, and especially, you look at the division they're in, the talent they have. Right now, they're in first place. And they are a team that is expected by the fans here and by many elsewhere to compete for it all at the end.
But why can't they do that with a young closer?
Well, but what I'm saying, why can't they? But you just said, try, and if he doesn't work, then try another guy, and if he doesn't work, try another.
Listen, they're gonna win the division anyway.
Well, and that's all well and good, but I think that you got to have somebody as that closer because we've seen it can cost you games. You can have this great, and then at the end lose it, and is that going to be the difference between win the division? Probably not in this division because how bad it is. Maybe if you're in a better division, you might have more pressure. But that's why I would like, personally, I'd like somebody that is proven, like a Papelbon, even though he's high priced. Or, Francisco Rodriguez only needs 2 more saves to get to 300.
How do you know that he's not going to come here and turn into Jose Valverde?
But here's the thing. You know what you're going to get with Valverde, which is, a terrible performance right now. And we saw Rondon. We tried him once in spring training, didn't really work. Tried him up here, didn't really work. And sure, you can try him again. For the third straight time, maybe the third time's a charm for him. And then what? You got, I've heard rumors that, hey, a guy like Porcello could close. I've heard that guy that is going to start tomorrow, Jose Alvarez, who's made 2 spot starts for Sanchez, as he's been on the DL. Maybe he could be like a long reliever, even a potential closer. But we've talked about this on the show before about how there's a mindset involved with closing, and I think it's tough that you just drop a guy into a Major League Baseball stadium and expect him to close a game. And I know that it's happened before with young closers because it's an interesting conundrum what happens with closers. But I think you need somebody that's proven to be the back end of this bullpen, and I hope they make a move at the deadline. I think that's your number one priority. You're not just a priority, but a concern. It's proven to be a concern. And because they tried Phil Koch, didn't work. Benoit's getting a second chance here. I think you need to address the situation with someone who's proven, not just like, hey, let the young guy try it. If you're a team that's already 10 games out or a team that doesn't have those expectations, that's fine. Hey, try it. Maybe it works next year. But the Tigers aren't thinking about next year. They're thinking about right now.
I know.
They're thinking about winning
next
right now.
year. Yes, they're not thinking about next year, but baseball is so long. The season is
I understand.
So long. Try Bruce Rondon. He only pitched 3 games when he was up here.
But he didn't do very well. But the thing is try this and try. I think you need to get someone who has tried before and has succeeded.
But you're not going to get somebody for at least a month. At least a month. So, in the meantime, what do you want to do? You want to keep Joaquin Benoit?
I don't know. That's it. But I think I think Leland. That's the reason he did that to Valverde. I think Valverde should be on his way out. And I think he's trying to force the hand of Dombrowski.
And then what happens? You move Joaquin Benoit to closer.
That's what Leland's doing right now.
Right,
yeah.
But then what happens? You move him, and then you trade for a closer. So then you bring him back. Now you move Benoit back to the 8th inning,
which he's used to, natural position.
But what if he loses it?
What if Benoit?
Because he's moving around.
I see. I don't think that he has that experience, and I think he's proven himself in that setup role. I think you can do that to a guy like a veteran. What I don't think you can do in moving around is, hey, Rondon, come back up here and try again. And if Rondon doesn't work, then what? You're going to try another guy from Toledo? Like, I don't like that idea of just, plugging and playing new guys that are just going to, like, get a shot. Like, this isn't a preseason game. Like, and I understand.
No, but it is. It is a preseason game. The season doesn't start until the playoffs start. I'm treating this regular season kind of like I treat the Red Wings regular season, where it's like, they're going to make the playoffs. So just figure out what's going to work once you're there.
And see, I think that's just a scary, like, that's tough to, I don't know.
The thing that hangs
like
in the balance is home field advantage, which is important for the Tigers because they play so much better at home than they do on the road. So that would be an area where I would agree that winning as many games as possible is important. But I would also point out that in past years, they've played much better at home than on the road. Even since the advent of Comerica Park in 2002 or 2001. And they've played better at home. And it's been, statistically proven and unquestioned. But they didn't have home field advantage in 2006, and they didn't have home field advantage in 2012, and they went to the World Series both years.
And they didn't have home field advantage at either of those World Series because of the All-Star game, and that kind of cost them in both situations.
All-Star games are not determined by how many wins you have, but if you win the All-Star game.
No.
So if you want to pin that on, Max Scherzer making a good start in the All-Star game, fine.
That's what I was going to say. So speaking of the All-Star game, Jim Leyland's going to be the manager, and there is a potential for Detroit's very own Max Scherzer, who is right now 10-0. The best start by a Detroit Tigers pitcher in the history of their franchise. He has a chance to start at the Citi Field up there in New York, the Mets ballpark, and I think that's a good thing for the Tigers. Last year we saw Verlander start, and he did not do very well in Kansas City. I kind of got knocked around a bit, and ultimately kind of set the tone for that game, and they ended up losing. Verlander actually took the loss in that game. It's an All-Star game, and I view it as it is kind of an exhibition, but in that one, it's not just like a glorified exhibition like a NHL All-Star game, NBA All-Star game, or the Pro Bowl, which is the worst of them all. Instead, this one, the players actually play, and they care, because if you're one of the like 3 or 4 teams that have a chance of really making the World Series, like the Tigers, if you get that good start, if Scherzer gives you a good, solid first 2 innings, he keeps you getting a chance to play in Comerica Park. While, Verlander gets knocked around the first inning, and all of a sudden, and who's he get hit by? It was kind of funny. It was a preview almost to the World Series. Pablo Sandoval hits a home run in the All-Star game off of Verlander. Then they go to AT&T Park, and he hits 3 home runs in the first game, and they trash Verlander in Game 1. So Scherzer is a guy who starts. All that to say that through the season, Scherzer has been, unquestionably, he's been your stud pitcher, your best starting pitcher. There's a reason he's 10-0. And we've both talked about this off air, and we were going to address this last show, but we didn't, like I said, because the carpet was being cleaned here in the studio, that you can argue that prize guy we're just talking about, Justin Verlander, is the worst starting pitcher of your staff right now.
Yeah, statistically he is. And I don't think that's, I'm not going to walk around Detroit saying, Justin Verlander's the worst pitcher on this staff, because he's not. But statistically, this season, he is. Mm-hmm. So that's a good problem to have.
I would agree.
Because I do think that he's going to right the ship.
I hope so.
He's going to return to maybe not quite as dominant as he was last year, where he's throwing complete games and stuff. But I expect that after the All-Star break, you're going to see a streak from Justin Verlander of maybe 5-6 games in a row where he's throwing over 7 innings, getting almost double-digit strikeouts.
The question I have for you is, are you worried at all right now? I know Verlander, he just inked that huge extension, and rightfully so. But the Tigers did not give him that contract based on what he had done, they are still expecting him to produce at a very high level. And, so far he has not been at that Justin Verlander. Sure, he's been a good pitcher, but he hasn't been, he's not been really a great pitcher, and he has not been the dominant JV, must-see JV that we're used to. I mean, last year, people tune in and you'd be like, hey, Justin Verlander, he's facing the Pirates or he's facing the Astros. He has a chance at a no-hitter right here. But this season, I had some numbers. In the last month, we're in June right now, but last month, in the month of May, Verlander had a 6.41 ERA. And last year, he had a 2.66 ERA in May, and he never had a monthly ERA of above 3.3, which was just a terrific year. And then what did he do the year before? Oh, he won the Cy Young and the MVP. But this year, I think the biggest stat that jumps out to me is that he has not gone at least 8 innings this entire season, which is incredible. Because last year, through June, he already had 4 complete games. And we would talk about this. Verlander was your stopper. It's like, oh, you played a 12, 14-inning game last night, or Scherzer got beat up and got knocked out in the 3rd inning or something, and you had to use the bullpen. Oh, it's all right. Verlander's pitching tomorrow. He's got this. He would go out there, pitch 125 pitches, 9-inning gem, and give up 2 or 3 runs. You get the win, and not only that, you didn't have to use anybody else on the mound. But this year, he's up to like 120 pitches in the 5th inning. His last start only went 5 innings. His last 7 starts, he has batters batting 289 against him, which is, you think about that, that's quite a stat, because before, the entire last season, batters were batting 220 against him, and that's pretty good. You're facing batters, and even against lefties, they're batting less than 200. This year, he is, through his last 7 starts, they're almost batting 300 against him, which frankly, you could almost say is unacceptable by Justin Verlander standards. And it is, because, he's a guy who has that Cy Young on his resume. He's a guy who has that MVP on his resume. And you can make the argument. I mean, I have the numbers in front of me for different pitchers. You have Scherzer that's 10-0. You have Fister with a 3.21 ERA, which is better than Verlander's 3.41. You can even make the argument Porcello had a 3.13 ERA in May, which is less than half of what Verlander's was in May, after Porcello had an 8.84 ERA in the first 2 months of the season, partially because he got drilled in that one game in Anaheim.
Right. But even for Verlander, even with the shortened starts, he's still on pace to pitch over 200 innings this season. Mm-hmm. And he's averaging 1 hit per inning, which isn't exactly the best. Mm-hmm. And when you add in the walks, which is how you calculate WHIP, he's 1.35, which isn't very good. You'd like to see about 1, a 1.0
I
WHIP.
mean, and especially from your ace.
But Scherzer is averaging a .91 WHIP, which is phenomenal. Mm-hmm. Anything under 1 is phenomenal. Mm-hmm. So, like I said, it's a good problem to have, and I'm really not worried about it. I'm really not. And I think Verlander will correct it. And like I said, he's still on pace to pitch over 200 innings. Mm-hmm. Right now, like currently, according to ESPN, he's got a 3.72 ERA, and batters are batting 257 against him. So that's up to date, current, up to his last start.
But like I said, in his last 7 starts, that's where they're batting nearly 300 against him.
Yeah, but I mean, like if you take out the one for Porcello, I mean, the thing about pitchers is, especially, he's only started 15 games. Mm-hmm. So things can be really inflated by 1 start or by 2 starts.
Like I said, and that's you can look at all these numbers. Like you compare him to a guy like Fister. Fister's a guy who has consistently through this year not gotten the run support like a Scherzer has. So, Scherzer's the guy who got those 17 runs for him when they played Houston. He leads the team in run support. That's why he's 10-0. But he's also, he's pitching very well. But a guy like Fister, he had that stretch where he pitched 3 quality starts, 2 of which were complete games, and he had 3 total runs of run support. He lost 2 of those games, which is just, there's an anomaly there if you look just at wins.
That's why wins and losses for pitchers.
So you can look at, I like ERA. Fister's ERA in his 4 losses is 4.44. Well, for Verlander, in his 4 losses is 6.55. So when he loses, when you give up 6 or 7 runs, you deserve to lose that game. Maybe if Fister only gives up 4, you might win that game, especially when he's pitching a complete ball game. And Fister, when you look at Fister and Verlander in their wins, Fister's ERA is slightly it's 2.81 in his 6 wins. Verlander's is 2.83 in his 8 wins. So that's, like I said, you can argue that everybody, even Porcello, as of right now, is pitching better than Mr. Verlander. Even you can look at a guy like a guy who might make a spot start for the Tigers once in a while, in Drew Smiley. He has a 1.94 ERA and a 1.00 ERA this month. He's been doing terrific as a long guy. You know, like we talked about that game when Porcello got knocked around Anaheim. That game was kind of out of reach, but they brought in Smiley, and he pitched a great game. Like, if that would have been a start, that would have been fantastic.
Right, and you brought up his numbers in his last 7 games, but he's 4-3 in those last 7 games.
Exactly.
So, I mean, and if you look at some of the run support, in the 3 games that he lost, he got a combined 8 runs.
Right.
So, he got 4 in one game at Texas back a month ago. And then his last 2 starts at Kansas City and versus Baltimore, he got 2 runs in each.
What?
He gave up 3 runs in one game and 5 in another. Now, if you give up 5 runs, or actually, I'm not 100% sure that, no, they were. He gave all 5 runs, and you're not necessarily expecting 6, 7, 8 runs.
Well,
but if you give up 3 runs...
That one at Texas is an interesting highlight because that was the one against another ace in Yu Darvish. That was the big matchup. It was on ESPN. It was a big deal, and Yu Darvish pitched very well, and Verlander did not rise to that occasion and really was well.
And we're coming to the end of the show, but in the game at Kansas City, he pitched 7 innings, 3 hits, no runs. He didn't give up any of those 3 runs, and they lost.
Right, exactly, and that
was the game Valverde
and
blew.
that's but you know, you look at a guy like Fister who gets screwed because, like I said, he had that 3-game span where he went into the 8th inning the one game, and then the other 2 were complete games, and he got 3 runs in support, loses 2 of those games. That's not really fair to him. He pitches great, right? But I think out of all these stats, and you can look at all these numbers ad nauseum all day long, the number one thing for me that has disappointed me about Verlander is not even, you know, he's 8-4 right now. Should he be, or I think, 8-4. Should he be, 10-0 like Scherzer? That's hard to do. You know, it's hard to replicate that.
It's not always indicative of how you pitch.
The thing that jumps out to me is that even Fister, like you said, he has those 2 complete games. Verlander has yet to go 8 innings. And I think that for a guy, you pay that money, he's your workhorse pitcher. He's that guy. You expect him to, not every start, but every couple, 2, 3 starts, go out there and at least pitch 8 innings, if not the whole game, which he's been able to do. He's been having rising pitch counts. I think it's been a problem, and that's what would worry me.
But 4 of his last 5 starts, he's gone 7 innings.
Right, that's like you, I'm not, freaking out, but if there was something that would bother me, it's that, because you can look at ERA and runs and all that, and those are all they can be funny numbers at times, especially wins and losses. But the thing that jumps out to me is that he has not even been able to go 8 innings this entire season.
And the only thing that would worry me about Justin Verlander is if he loses that competitive edge and that killer instinct that we've seen so many times. He's still, even when he's not pitching at his peak, he's still avoiding Jim Leland so he can stay in the game.
And I personally,
he's still coming out after the rain delay to pitch again. You still see those things, and that's what makes me comfortable.
I don't think he's going to lose that. He might have lost that, ability to always go 9 innings. But hopefully, especially after the All-Star break, we see a rise in that. And if this is his bad pitching, for him, which it is bad pitching for him, as right now, this could be a solid 2 or 3 on his staff.
If this is the worst first half for his career in the next 3-4 years, I'll take it.
Right. And
hands down.
Because you're absolutely right.
This
is a great problem to have, because you're talking about arguably one of the best pitchers that we've seen in a long time be the worst on his team. And I think that it just blows my mind, and we've talked about this before, but if this is his bad pitching, especially by Justin Verlander standards, get it out of the way now, and when we're sitting in September, be pitching into the 8th inning,
right?
And I'll be fine.
Baseball fans have a tendency to react quickly to things that happen, and all that really matters is to make the playoffs and to make another playoff run, and that's what we need to look forward to, and that's what this Tiger season has been all about. But we're going to take our break now. We'll come back with discussion of both the NBA and NHL finals.